You let me know if you're ready to go. My bad. Okay. You're currently sitting in the modest accommodations provided in the tavern. The conversation, as you had expected, is surprisingly forthcoming. Abad doesn't seem, at least as far as you can tell, to be withholding or otherwise attempting to snake his way around details. In fact, he's probably the most free with information you've seen most people. Not that this is something super unusual, especially given what you are. People don't tend to be friendly in this age. Life is hard, and therefore people are hard. But somehow, in spite of all of it, likely due to a more privileged upbringing, he seems a bit more optimistic and, dare I say, helpful. He offers you... goodbye forever. Send you another invite. But it said you were in here. I sent you another invite. You just... Oh, I sent you a couple, just in case.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Take your time, man. If you need to...
Disconnect from Steam. There we go.
Alright. You just let me know if you're, good. I'm just waiting for you to connect.
I'll probably need another invite because you're set to invisible.
Yep, sent you another one. I sent you two.
That one... What the... try one more, because I'm getting a pop-up. I wasn't able to read it because I was in the Steam overlay.
Sure, there's another one.
You've been invited to a game by check Steam overlay. Okay, those are not going through. I don't know why.
I doubt it's because I'm invisible. But let's try not being invisible. See what happens. How about now?
That one works.
Okay, so I guess it's apparently just because I'm invisible. And then we go invisible again. Alright. Let me know if everything's loaded in. You got what you need. Right. He reaches for a kind of tarnished wooden kind of jug, and he brings it over to two wooden cups. He pours a reddish liquid from the wooden kind of tankard into both cups. He offers you one. I realize this is a lot, but understand, my friend, that I am not simply giving this information to you for free. Not that you will have to compensate me. If you'll let me explain, perhaps it will make more sense. He kind of holds the cup out to you.
I see. Thank you.
He gives you a bit of a nod and then kind of allows the aroma of whatever is in the glass, presumably some sort of liquor, kind of hover just a few centimeters from his nose, and he kind of gives it a brief smell, twirling it as though it were a fine vintage. He then takes a sip, and for a second or so, you see his face very momentarily twist into an expression of, not dissatisfaction, though there's a certain sourness about it, as though perhaps he regrets his kind of elaborate ritual for something so base. He looks at you. Do you remember what I told you about my homeland? At least my circumstance. How my family is rather, shall we say, wealthy.
I remember quite a few things. You claimed you had a very large family, many sons, some daughters.
Yes. I I will speak plainly. My father... My father is a very powerful man. He is a noble in the kingdom, as it were. It's a bit different from how you northerners do things, but I am trying to explain it such that you might understand. And my father employs a seer of sorts. When a son or a daughter reaches an age that is appropriate, they are ushered to the seer for a vision of what it is they are meant to do in this life. And while it is not compelled, it is recommended that those that receive such a vision do their best to follow it through, typically. But there is such an occasion where these visions take you away from what you cherish most. For me, it was my children and my wife and my homeland. The seer told me that I was needed far north in a place that he could not say, but that I would find of my own accord. And in doing such, I would fulfill my own desires for knowledge and worldly experience and pleasures. Being a small boy at the time, I did not fully grasp this knowledge. But as I got older, and as my father grew comfortable with the idea of me traveling to the lands of our former enemies, he understood that perhaps in time this would harden me to the miseries of the world, and once I returned, I would truly be able to succeed his position, having seen beyond our borders and into a much vaster, grander place. But this is beside the point. I believe I know now why I am here. And it seems such a strange reason, but though I do not know you, and I do not know your companion, it seems obvious to me that this is the moment in which I am almost compelled to make a decision. But before I do so, I must ask you, are you willing to do what is needed for the benefit of others beyond that which you seek? Understand that this is a long and difficult path, and there is no reward or guarantee of life or even reward. It may even turn out fruitless. Yet, there is that flicker, that probability that perhaps you may do something truly great and unprecedented. And though I'm unsure as to what your talents may be, and yet somehow I feel compelled to trust you with this. I have never felt this way before in all my ventures. In fact, I have seen many a great and wondrous thing. From the landmarks in Romea to the battle zones across the Sistine, and not once did I ever question myself in those moments. It was merely a passing fancy. I have also met many individuals, many powerful, wealthy, and a very small number of whom are, shall we say, gifted in the Arcanum, or blessed by other, more divine means. And yet not once did I doubt those encounters or question my decisions within them until now. And so I ask you, am I correct? Is there something about our meeting here that is truly unusual? Could this be that moment? He is definitely asking you some sort of cryptic, almost bizarrely, not necessarily fatalistic, but almost as if he's asking you to kind of affirm that for some reason he is convinced that the vision that he claims he was accorded by the seer at the behest of his father led him to this place, and though he claims he has seen and experienced many things, that none of those moments compelled him to action much like this one does currently. However you choose to use that information is up to you, but it almost seems like he is willing to be your co-conspirator, at least for the moment. Whether or not you trust him with sensitive information is up to you, but he seems to be considering a rather weighty and, well, at least based on what you can tell from his expression, monumental decision. You can almost see the weight on his shoulders as his posture sags somewhat and he becomes lost in the kind of darkish hue of the wine, barely illuminated by the candlelight in the room. So he seems kind of ponderous at the moment, almost lost, kind of half paying attention to the conversation.
I'm no stranger to the occasional cryptic future seeing myself, but I must admit, the last few weeks have thrown me for a bit of a loop.
Kind of pauses for a moment and then he looks at you. Do you believe in destiny? Or do you believe that each man forges his own path and through that forging creates endless possibility?
Randall gives a bit of a grin. Well, the possibilities are what we make of them. Every choice creates an echo.
He gives you a bit of a nod and swirls the wine. He takes another sip. I do not have the information I seek, not all of it. I have spoken to you, of course. I have done so in private because the information regarding your friend, while incomplete and not conclusive, is such that perhaps it is best discussed in a manner that would not upset him. Though I do not know who he is, it is generally not a good idea to question somebody's faculties when they are present, unless you are very close to them.
I see. I would not begrudge you the decision. Atticus has been rather obsessed with his Liber of late.
Is his obsession born of reason? Or does it seem compelled as if by sorcery?
Compelled by sorcery? Ironically, I highly doubt that. Where it came from, I could scarcely hazard a guess. I've known many a person who's lost compatriots and companions, but nothing as to cause a strange obsession with something that essentially has very little to do with him, as it does that book.
Do you know your friend well? Have you traveled together long?
The lesser part of a few weeks, but, well, circumstances permit admit I get to know him better than I might have at one point cared to know.
Is he trustworthy?
Randall kind of sets the cup down for a little bit and then looks into it.
The liquid within is, in fact, dark and a little bit unappealing. There's kind of a very, very, very slight but noticeable kind of few flecks of what you could only imagine are grape rinds. Not so much as to overwhelm the entirety of the wine, but enough that you definitely notice the texture as you kind of swirl the wine around in your mouth. Whatever this vintage is, it was clearly fairly hastily put together and not entirely high class, as it were. The shadows of the room almost make it look like an ominous sort of void-like concoction.
From what I have seen of him, he is a very competent marksman. He does apparently usually what he is told, though his description of his recent contract is rather vague, and in all other things, his plans are known only to him, and attempting to pry anything has been... Well, I am no apothecary, but it's been akin to pulling teeth.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
The only real thing of substance to mark against his trustworthiness is supposedly he met a Farkrathian knight on the road. This knight generously gave him his money and fell ill, and next thing I know, he's spent a considerable amount of coin on a fanciful sword.
See. For any reason or just fancy? I'm merely curious. The spending habits of others is not my business, as it were, but in such times...
I understand. It seemed as if some peculiar fascination fell upon him, and he simply had to have the blade, no matter the cost. And other than that, he scarcely wants me to touch it, as, well, that's frankly not unusual. He doesn't want me touching many of his things. He likes to keep everything clean, as he says.
I can respect a man who takes care of his belongings. It's not entirely unusual. But...
Though, whenever the subject is broached, he tends to get combative and closes off. As do many of his seemingly harebrained schemes. They'll come up out of nowhere. I will attempt to defuse them with simple what-ifs, and then he'll merely look away in a huff as if I had dismantled his entire overarching Machiavellian scheme.
Does your companion have any desires, any ambitions, any wants that are reasonably fulfillable by gold or by favors?
None that seem to be anything more than a flight upon the wind, save maybe this one off-mention of at one point wishing to become a noble.
Very interesting. Has he mentioned this often, or not at all? Or was it merely a passing comment, as if those that are unsatisfied with their lot often fantasize about the wealth and power bestowed by the royal bloodlines?
He has mentioned wishing to rival by his station twice before, though he has elaborated even less upon why.
Can't imagine it is something that must merit explanation. Men simply wish to be more wealthy and powerful than they currently are, almost always. Not entirely uncommon.
I just hope that particular desire does not coincide with his current charge.
He finishes his cup of wine and gently puts it on the wooden table. He brings one of the candles nearby and shifts one of the stools between the both of you. He puts the candle in the center and then he continues speaking. I will speak to Atticus once we have concluded our business, but he gives it some thought. Understand that if our encounter seems to go as I envision, I may be placing a great burden upon you. And you may ask yourself why I would do such a thing. It is not simply because I am compelled by my destiny, that which the seer foresaw a decade ago at least, but because who else would I entrust such responsibility to if not you? You are just as likely to fail or succeed as most men, and yet you have talents that most men do not have. And so, as such, I would determine that you are far safer than at least average. Although, that will be discussed perhaps later. This book, this Liber that you say Atticus is unusually attached to, has he told you anything about it outside of what little I was told by your former associate? Even he was somewhat reticent to divulge all of the details.
Randall looks at him in the eye and then takes a swig from the mug, mulling it over whether or not to spill the beans entirely. You have been fair with me, and frankly, I know little of what can be done in the acting circumstances, so I feel it's best to be forthright and honest. The book is apparently the former property of the very being that, well, now curses Atticus and I. Adding upon that, it is also now apparently the prison of some heinous artifacts shard.
And this thing, from whence did it come?
Atticus tells me that he and a man that he traveled with before me, a man named Franco, some form of gem. Gunnet? Franco Gunnet. Yes, I think that's it. Him and a couple of others he mentioned, he said that there was a dwarf and some man he met in Lakeshore, and that they found it within some swamp in Tentia.
And I can imagine this thing was not simply lying in wait for a band of would-be adventurers to come and swipe it and make off with it. Just like that. Typically such things, especially if they're of power or value, are jealously coveted by, shall we say, less than savory creatures.
That is the thing. If Atticus' story is to be believed, and he was completely forthright with me, which took some prying, I'll tell you, supposedly they just wandered into a cabin. They scarcely remember how it became empty. They were attacked by small marionette children monstrosities, and then they just made off with some contents of the hut.
His brow furrows as he considers your statements. Okay. That makes some manner of sense. If whatever this... You were very much expected to perish in that place. Or, well, he was. Yet, conveniently, he survived. Cannot imagine it was through sheer skill of arms that he was able to best... What was it? Horrific child abominations?
He described them as small, almost childlike abominations with stitched limbs and large, bony protrusions.
He holds up a hand and shudders visibly. Enough, please. Let's not speak of such things. I understand.
Very
well. It's very clear that your description, vivid and detailed as it is, has definitely spurred his imagination into full gear, and he doesn't appear to be pleased. He then asks, uh, and was there anything else, or was it simply a strange place guarded by these odd creatures?
Other than that, the only thing that Atticus mentions is that before they entered the hut, that there was my character rolls his eyes. Supposedly a preternaturally beautiful woman who made her way into the hut and then disappeared when they opened the door.
He nods. Yes, it seems as though your friend perhaps encountered. Uh, he struggles a moment to grasp for the right word in the Basilari dialect. Epifici. He thinks again. You know that word. Witch.
Ah, yes, a witch.
It seems to me that she felt comfortable in the capabilities of these creatures to kill Atticus and his friends, or she would have remained behind, and, well, I doubt that he and his companions would have lived to see the next day, as it were. So, I can only imagine that if this creature survived, and more importantly, if her minions had been dispatched, and she had been, for lack of a better term, robbed, he has made a very angry and possibly very powerful enemy. He gives
That
it some
seems likely, yes.
I will be blunt with you, Randall. I do not trust your friend to carry this object. In my homeland, we have a saying: he who bears the mark of the dark must carry forth its burdens. Do you understand what this means? If you don't, you can just say no.
Not entirely.
It is said in my homeland that those who possess gifts have a responsibility and a duty to safeguard those of us who do not have them. Because men bowling in the affairs of the Arcanum is dangerous unless they understand what it is that they are prodding with their curiosity. Atticus, insofar as I have seen, and, well, so far as he has told you, does not seem to be a man, shall we say, uniquely blessed with such talent, sufficient to be the steward of this object. In fact, I would imagine that the only one who I could trust, well, at least here, to be that steward is you. For who more qualified to forge a sword than he who has trained in the art?
I've made it that obvious, have I?
Most men I speak with do not seem to possess the knowledge that you do, and you did confirm it earlier in our speech. Unintentionally, perhaps.
Aye, that is fair.
But know that I do not hold it against you. In fact, to be honest, I pity you. It is a great responsibility. You have, though I am unsure as to the nature, great power at your behest. Yet, much is expected of you. From many. Well, at least if you were a man in my culture, things would be different. I know they tend to be a bit more, shall we say, discriminatory here toward your kind. But be that as it may, that does not absolve you of your duty. You are blessed, whether you like to believe it or not, with the guardianship of all especially those who do not bear your gifts. Now, of course, you don't have to listen to me, but when such objects fall into the hands of men such as myself, your friend Atticus, and others, no amount of wealth, power, or influence will immunize them to the effects of such power. It turns ugly and dark in their souls, nests, corrupts their very being, and brings to light their worst traits. A man who is simply a bit greedy becomes unnecessarily covetous. A man with dark intentions for violence suddenly becomes a beast. Those who seek to control and dominate others will seek that outcome to the detriment of all. Such objects are not to be trifled with lightly. I believe I have a greater understanding of why I was here. And should you accept this burden, I believe that if what you have told me is correct, and that Atticus is a man of, such shall we say, more earthly desires, I may be able to barter the object from him in exchange for an opportunity at what you claim he has mentioned many times. As stated, my family is quite wealthy and well-connected, even insofar as the imperial court. Atticus is but a soldier. Even with his decoration, it would take him many, many more decades to even see the threshold of such a place. And yet, with my assistance, I could ensure that not only would he be able to return to his homeland, but perhaps to do so with honors and an opportunity to seek his ambition. Understand, I do not gain much from this, aside from maybe a friend in the Imperial Court, an additional ally, as it were. But I value other things much more highly. I was given a task since a young age, and here I am now with the opportunity to fulfill it. I will not fail in this task. I wish to return to my wife and my children. I wish to see my father and my ailing mother before she is to pass from this world. But I cannot do so until this task is finished. But tell me, Randall, will you take this thing if I am able to barter it from your companion? It will become your responsibility, your task, but understand it will also become yours.
I would be willing if you would be amenable to elucidating me on perhaps clarifying something on something you said earlier.
He nods.
You stated that men of my kind tend not to understand what exactly it is that they are trying to. Could you elucidate me to that?
Not your kind, specifically. Men such as myself and your friend Atticus. We are not uniquely shaped to handle such strange oddities, for they bear the mark of a place far removed from our own, and it scratches and bangs against the walls of this world, attempting to find a way in, and occasionally does so in the form of these curiosities.
Ah, the dark.
Yes, I am not a gifted individual, but as stated, my family is very wealthy. As such, I was accorded the privilege of access to the world's greatest cultures, libraries, and Athenaeums. I have learned much, and yet, in spite of all of that, I know very little. I can only hope that my actions here this day absolve me of my destiny, and perhaps set yours in motion, whatever that may be. Kind of gives you a couple minutes to process the information. It seems at the very least that, based on what he said, and based on the rather thoughtful glance that he's giving you, that he understands the gravity of what he has just placed on you. A man that he has no real reason to trust, that he does not know intimately or even personally, at least not to the degree that would necessitate such a impactful charge. Yet, for some reason, he seems to genuinely trust you. A rare thing in this world. I'm just giving you an opportunity to speak. If you need a couple seconds, just let me know.
I, understandably reluctantly, will accept the responsibility of carrying this misbegotten witch's playthings. Though I, to be perfectly honest, haven't the slightest idea of what to do with it aside to keep it from things that would otherwise want it.
He gives you a couple nods and then mentions something. There is a way I may assist you. In my scholarly pursuits, he reaches for the kind of semi-tarnished wooden jug and pours himself another cup of wine. I read many a tale of the Northerners, of their battles and of their struggles. Much of it, understand, is crude and improperly organized, with much information missing, suspiciously edited, altered, or left out. But that thing that your friend possesses reminds me of an object. Scholarly pursuits and legends have. There was a man in my culture a very, very long time ago, I would say maybe 200 years ago, who sought to remap the essential events of his life, as it were. He was a gifted man, like you. He spent his youth studying the arts, perfecting them, living with both the benefit and the curse of such power. He has remained nameless in our annals, but his deeds have been recorded. It is said that throughout time and space, beyond definition, far above what most of us would consider possible, he takes a sip of the wine, almost as if he's not believing what he's about to tell you. He claimed that with an appropriate conduit of sufficient power, he could remap the entirety of not just his fate, but the fate of our world, such that he could bring about some sort of peace. Yet, his work was never finished. Of course, no man lives for centuries. He passed from this world some time ago, but they say that somewhere in this world his ambition lives. His work, his studies, his inventions, they live. And his vision endures with it. And so you might ask yourself, how does this apply to me? Well, understand what I will offer you is but a theory, but in his writings he described one object he had managed to uh, pluck from the threads of time, and yet never whole, always in pieces. And with it, he could, even with said fragments, continue to utilize his gifts to remap his destiny such that he could complete it, and then use this object as a conduit for his talents, and thus begin a great reshaping of our world. Understand this seems mad? Impossible? I believe that the object that he sought, with the power sufficient to allow such changes to our world, was none other than the one from which you hold a fragment.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
It's kind of out of left field, but can I do a magical crafting check to see whether or not my character even believes this is like physically possible?
Yeah, go ahead. Roll
Like
me
1d10.
Sure. So just ask a more specific question. So what are you trying to determine using your magic crafting? You want to determine if it is possible, and I'm not going to speak for you, so let me know if I'm misrepresenting what you want to do.
So my character is going to attempt to use his knowledge of how he would interweave like magic into an object to see what would typically be possible with something that my character could do that through the bounds of an artifact that, say, destroyed a city could potentially.
Sorry, please reword that, because we're getting to the point now where we need specifics. Okay, try again. Sorry, I'm trying to get everything here.
Alright, so my character is essentially attempting to figure out whether or not it's actually physically possible for an object of such significance to still be around and, like powered.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just give me a 10.
17.
Sure. I was also willing to give you a +2 bonus because he's basically lore dumped you with some fairly useful information regarding kind of the scholarly background of utilizing his scholarly background. He's basically been able to kind of fill in some blanks that perhaps you yourself had in your own knowledge, just kind of tangentially throughout the course of your life as you've been a mage. I mean, you've read many books and many theories, and some of them are plausible, some of them are insane, and well, talking to this guy might have filled some of those holes in for you. Okay, so here's what I'll tell you. As a practitioner of magical crafting, specifically the ability to kind of not only imbue and create items that are magical in the long run, but to sort of infuse them with your essence in perpetuity, you know that some objects have a limited lifespan. And the more powerful the object, typically the more powerful the user has to be, and the more of themselves they have to sacrifice. There are many stories in the world of very powerful magicians or entire conclaves utilizing vast quantities, untold amounts of magic to create truly apocalyptic items or useful trinkets or blessings, but typically such power either renders them inert or kills them in the case of failure. That said, with regard to a theoretical object of such power, not only is it possible for such an object to exist, but assuming it's even forged by people qualified enough to give it the magical potential that it is claimed to have, something of this power that he is describing that quite literally has the ability to enable the manipulation of a greater concept of existence would, in theory, if whole, last forever. Or, as far as a human lifespan is concerned, basically forever. Does that answer your question, or do you need more details?
That answers my question.
Okay. He continues. But, as I mentioned, he, of course, did not live forever. Even the most powerful of us must succumb to time.
Though if his story is to be believed, it is very possible that his work survives him. I could begin looking for that.
I will warn you that it is not easy to find. As mentioned, I too, along with my father, and well, it was mostly due to my interest in prodding, attempted to find any remnants I could of his work, as it were, but even our seer, powerful as he is, struggled to locate any remnant of this being's recordings. You see, as the seer described it, and I do not know if you have the same gift, he described it as though you are looking at a painting that has yet to be completed. You may see pieces, and perhaps, with time and a bit of luck, piece together that which is missing. Yet, if the wrong pieces are missing, in just the right places, without some sort of additional clue or portion of the painting, you will never truly complete it. It is almost impossible to see. Like a black hole in the ground. You see the hole for what it is, but not what lay behind it or within it. Is that something that perhaps you know? If you're confused by the way he's describing it, you can do a magic knowledge check.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Yeah. Just give me a 10. What'd you get?
Let's see, magic knowledge.
Or the requisite skill, what it might be now.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a skill for magic knowledge. I think it's just a talent.
Sure. Yeah, right. Because it's a specialty check. You obviously have the talent, so I'll just give it to you. It seems like he's describing the holes and uncertainties that appear when using foresight or presight. Like, you can look sometimes into certain paths and certain places, but there are occasions where there are whole portions of the puzzle missing. That neither the future tends to be uncertain and the past tends to be murky. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle where, if you've ever seen a jigsaw puzzle in real life, if the right pieces are in place, you might be able to accurately guess what it's trying to portray. But if you're missing the right pieces in the right places, you'd never be able to guess what it is, right? That's sort of what he's describing. And occasionally you've encountered that as well. It's not the first time that you may have tried to use your powers to glance anywhere. Sometimes you get answers that are cryptic, other times you get answers that are completely 100% reliable, and other times there are places that almost seem excessively difficult, or like they're missing some crucial link, and to jump into that darkness is a risk that no sane mage typically takes, because what could be within, while might be beneficial, could also drive you insane. It's almost like a network with dead zones. Just because there's a dead zone doesn't mean there's danger, but what it does mean is that because there's a dead zone, there definitely could be, and it could be fatal. It's basically like throwing your mind into a black hole of randomness and madness.
Okay.
Even powerful seers avoid that. Yeah, sorry. So he continues. We tried many times to use his power to, well, I'll be honest with you, it was mostly to fulfill my scholarly curiosity. I wanted to read the works of this being, and indeed to gaze upon whatever his abode was, if indeed he had one, and to peruse his archives, of which I'm sure there were many. Imagine a man blessed such that, upon a whim, could change the entire circumstance of not only himself, but others. There was one detail. The man, this nameless lord, he claimed that he could shape the thread of a man's existence, but he could not see into it, nor its consequences. Imagine a man who works with clay and who molds a sculpture, but did so without image or intent. Does this make sense? He simply plies his craft with a vision, but not necessarily with a certain outcome in mind. There is no certainty. Those who look cannot often shape, and those who shape cannot often look. He's basically
a somewhat apt way of describing it, yes.
Yeah, like he's basically describing the difference between people who can actually see and sort through like the threads in destiny and time versus those who cannot but can actually change them with all the consequences that come from fucking around without really looking and using only your base knowledge, of which you would already know sounds insanely dangerous and risky for many reasons. Would you hold on for a sec? I'm going to grab some coffee and take a piss.
Sure.
Do you have any questions so far that I could answer before kind of going to relieve my shit?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Just give me a second. Yep. Bud kind of uncharacteristically downs the entirety of his wine cup, and then eventually kind of spits a little bit of it on the floor. Terrible vintage. Well, take what you can, I suppose. I do not wish to spoil our interaction with banal bartering of favors, but I must ask something of you.
Yes.
Fate has deemed it appropriate to bring me to such a place where I may fulfill my small part in this tale. But I do have something to ask of you. Should you find this being's archivium or his arcanium, I would very much enjoy an opportunity to study and read his works, but more importantly, should you find this thing of which you hold but a small piece, if you should discover anything at all that could be useful to me, I merely ask that you give me one opportunity to utilize this power. Understand something. My mother is very sick. She is dying. She carries with her an illness that she has had since she was little, but it has now taken full effect. Our greatest physicians cannot cure her, and we have been unable to find a gifted individual who can stay or remove the illness. Or should you find this object, and should you find whatever it is this scholar was working on, all I ask is that you give me an opportunity to utilize this power at your behest and with your supervision so that I might save her. You can kind of see very plainly and obviously, in spite of the somewhat dim light in the room, that he has a certain sincerity in his eyes, and not only that, but a strong conviction. His features harden somewhat, and you can see that this has very clearly been on his mind for much longer than just a few months. This is something that has been years in the making.
Well, I would certainly be amenable to that. However, I have a single query.
Yes?
Randall brings forth his right hand forth as if to offer a handshake. Would you like that before or after the painting for your son? Randall gives somewhat of a wry grin.
Yeah, he kind of reaches a hand forward and gives you a firm shake. Before, if possible.
I see. Well, if I can manage into the archivum or lexiconum or library or whatever this strange previous sovereign had, escape with my life and then potentially the life of any compatriots I bring along, and I can find out where you live, I will most certainly consider it.
Thank you, Randall. You have no idea how grateful I am to have this opportunity. I do not believe that every being consigned to a fate must adhere to its outcome completely. Yet, I do believe that we must all play our parts up until the moment such that we deem perhaps some things may be altered. As for your friend Atticus, well, I have no guarantee that he will cooperate with me, but if what you have told me is indeed true, I can imagine I should be able to barter for the object. I will not steal it from him or have him killed or any such awful barbarism. I do not know the man, so I cannot condemn him, but I do know that should he assist me in fulfilling my obligations to my people and my father, I will assist him in fulfilling his. It is a fair trade. And I would also rather have such an object with the gifted than the not. For as you seem to suspect, he does not appear to be handling this burden well. That he has handled it as long as he has is very impressive. But the will of a man breaks under sufficient pressure. It is merely a matter of time. Very well. I will speak to your companion over the night, and I will see what can be done. If you don't mind, give me a moment to consider what we've spoken of, and if you could please let Atticus know that should he wish, I would very much like to speak with him. I have an offer to make him that I believe he shall find fairly enticing.
I see.
Yep. Do you wish to ask me anything before we part ways?
I've traveled quite a bit, but I don't believe I've ever been to your particular side of the world. Is there anything I should expect that is outside of the norm of Acretia or the lands of Roma or Bersani?
He looks at you for a moment and then smiles. You will not be going to my lands for a very long time. Very strange, kind of cryptic statement. Almost as if he knows something that you do not. But he doesn't elaborate further. Some things
his head a bit and then just kind of shrugs. Very well.
Yep. Some things are better left to the whims of fate. He stands and then gives you a firm pat on the shoulder. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Randall. I can only hope that I have not condemned you to a worse fate than you are already experiencing. But when faced with certain death, what is death? He smiles.
Yes,
all right.
Not with an inconvenience. All right, I'll go look for Atticus then.
Yep. He opens the door leading from his leading from his room, and you hear it kind of lightly close behind you. Looking down the hallway of the upper floor of the tavern, you could see the occasional patron weaving in and out of their room, speaking to some of the others that are kind of currently enjoying a mixture of alcohol and whatever, whatever foods they have purchased on the side, links of sausage, bread, cheese. There's a lot of kind of hearty laughter and banter being exchanged by all sorts. Atticus is sitting at a round table near the edge, close to the stairway. He seems to be maintaining his clothes and his weaponry, but doesn't seem to be speaking to anybody. He has a rather modest layout of food at his front, and a kind of tankard of likely some sort of ale nearby. Nobody else sits at this table with him. In fact, he seems to actively discourage anybody from bothering him with a scowl or just like an odd look.
All right. I will slowly approach the table, assuming he does not give me one of those scowls or odd looks.
No, he almost he kind of passively sort of acknowledges your presence the way he usually does, not with much recognition, but he gives you kind of a half-assed nod.
Hello again, Atticus. Finding anything out of sorts?
He doesn't say much. He just kind of gives you a bit of a look. You can see in his eyes. Give me an empathy check. Give me a 15. Okay, well. Oh, that was a 6, and reroll the 10.
11.
You're not beating him. He just rolled massive explosives. Yeah, you have no chance. It's probably just in a bit of a crabby mood. You've had quite the adventure getting here, and doesn't really seem to be anything out of the sorts. Do you say anything else to him?
Brandon will move to sit down.
He doesn't stop you or try to block you in any way. He is fixated upon you, but well, obviously you're the only person sitting with him.
I see. Well, Atticus, I've spoke with our mutual friend, Abad. You may remember him, or not. Either way, he wishes to see you in a few minutes. He believes he has an offer that you may find agreeable.
Atticus's brow quirks somewhat. And then he kind of leans back a bit in his chair, grabbing the ale tankard and kind of downing it rather quickly. He packs away some sausage and cheese and just sort of kind of rudely kind of munches on them with his mouth open, kind of maintaining eye contact with you. But after a minute or so of this bizarre posturing, he kind of stands from his seat, gathers his things, and begins walking in the direction of Abad's room. In doing so, not only did he not acknowledge you formally, he gives you a look over his shoulder. And again, all you see is that kind of grumpy, weathered look that he tends to have fairly often these days. But he says nothing. You see him kind of make his way down the hall, past a few patrons, even shouldering past one of them who kind of gives him a bit of guff, but thinks better of causing an issue with a man so clearly angered by something, or at the very least, ready to scrap at a moment's notice. You see Atticus kind of bang on Abad's door, and then, as it opens, he disappears within. As for you, what's going through your head right now? Your character's head. What do you make of the situation?
Well, He certainly doesn't seem best pleased to be or amenable to any, formal discussion with anybody, much less something he barely probably knows.
Right. Anything else?
Well, other than that, my character's probably lightly famished. My character probably order a sausage.
Okay, yeah. You take a bit of the sausage out, give it a bite. It's a bit salty, somewhat dry, but expected. It's good though. Atticus left some of the food on his plate and some of the ale. Do you wish to partake, or are you just gonna kind of leave his things alone?
I'll leave his things alone.
Okay. Yeah, he something tells you that this is going to be a bit of a lengthy discussion between him and Abad, and if Atticus's mood is anything to go by, well, Abad might have his work cut out for him, especially given what you know about him. Does your character have any thoughts about Abad? Anything that he's kind of musing over?
Other than my character recognizing that he's a bit more, knowledgeable about, stuff that he's supposed to be good at on the subject, and that there's a couple of different disciplines that, Abad's seer in particular is actually probably particularly better at my character at doing.
Okay. Repeat one more time. Just so I didn't miss any details. Sorry, the music was slightly loud. I'm just turning it down.
Yeah, based on Abad's description of his seer, the seer he mentions, kind of offhandedly, is probably, honestly, a little bit better at certain disciplines of, potentially divination than my character is good at.
It's possible, but outside of a few kind of sort of inlaid talents that people of your craft tend to have, you have the feeling that not all of you are carbon copies of one another. Your experiences in life and who you are distinct enough that even though you practice the same craft, your methods and your capabilities are likely to be vastly different and disparate. Right. But it's not unreasonable to assume that, given this seer's supposed position, that sounded kind of prominent, that he is definitely quite skilled. If not on your level, then definitely a bit higher. Abad, very clearly, based on his description, doesn't really understand to the fullest extent kind of the minutiae and the intricate details of magic, period.
Right.
He's obviously read some of it, but given that he cannot truly experience what that's like, he's sort of basing his knowledge on what was written by his betters in that regard. Especially when he was trying, although perhaps he didn't know, to describe the difference between just the differences between somebody who can see the future and somebody who can change it. There are very fine, almost annoying details in the magical arts that only a true practitioner can generally unearth with any level of reliability. Magic is insanely complicated, and it is often simplified for the sake of those who do not practice it. But anybody who is actually a practitioner understands that even something as simple as, say, fire is immensely complicated. Even conjuring a simple spell takes an effort of both. It takes a perfect combination of both willpower, knowledge, and luck. All of these things in concentration to achieve what is otherwise completely impossible. And a human, at least a human not blessed with that ability, is basically just grasping at theories in the dark. If that makes any sense.
It does.
Yep.
I also noticed that there's a couple of things that he kind of stonewalled me on, or was at the very least incredibly cryptic. When I basically was asking, what's the like, what's your country like? He's like, well, you're not going to be there for a long time, as if he predicted that, or was told that this particular question might come up.
He didn't say you'd never go there, just that you wouldn't go there for a very long time. So,
yeah, as if the information wouldn't be relevant, or I would learn that much before it would ever matter.
Yep. Understand that if what he says is true, whatever seer that he had access to, or that he has access to, likely has told him all of this and what to expect, and more importantly, given that you're kind of in a similar sphere as his seer, if what he told you is true, even you know that based on how based on the nature of your powers, it's so rare that you just get a straight up, concise, precise answer to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way he's speaking definitely mirrors the speech patterns of somebody who is either aware of knowledge that they should not have access to, or is simply kind of repeating it by rote. He's heard it so often and so frequently that it's basically become ingrained in his mind. Somebody who forges a sword through experience could, in some instances, not actually be able to tell you or show you how to do it yourself, but they know because they've just studied it and they've been told. It's been drilled into their head over and over and over again by just repeating the action. And when you kind of pass knowledge on to people, they will retain it. It's kind of like how propaganda works, right? They don't understand the details of how propaganda comes to be, but if you keep repeating it to them over and over and over and over and over again, they are likely to not only believe it, but also repeat it to you. So it's kind of weird how that works, right?
All right.
So, like, trying to find a good way of explaining it. It was very clear that he likely knew more that he wasn't telling you. Give me a kind of a check do I want to have you make here?
Recall?
I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if it's necessarily recall, but
Empathy?
yeah, give me a. I'm gonna go with recall for now, only because I can't think of anything else. I don't call for much. Just give me a 10. I'll even give you a +2 on it.
17.
Yeah. It's very obvious that while he was fairly forthcoming with you and didn't, at least that you could detect, seem to be like lying or at least not maliciously, it definitely concealed some stuff. There's a reason why he's speaking to you and Atticus in private. Whether or not that is an issue of trust, or perhaps because he was specifically directed to do so by someone else, is unknown. Though it's likely that he's sort of playing out a situation exactly as he wants to. Why he's doing it is up to you to determine for yourself, but it's very clear that it is likely Atticus will also receive information not only for himself and to his benefit, but maybe even about you that Abad deigned you not necessarily unworthy, but unfit at the moment to hear for whatever reason, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's not an unreasonable assumption, and not necessarily rooted in malice. Again, there is procedure that generally should be followed when acting on the advice of any sort of seer. Stray just a little bit from your path, and you could essentially set alight your entire purpose. If that
he's
makes
going
sense.
through the motions so he doesn't potentially cause a butterfly effect and cause things to go wildly out of difference than what they should be.
Maybe, if that's how it even works, but it does seem like, at least at the moment, this entire ordeal is kind of very elegantly arranged and very, I would almost say, choreographed. Like, he is sort of making sure that things align such as to not upset whatever result he wants to get. You can only assume it would be at the behest of this seer that he claims set him on this path, but that being said, again, all assumptions. You could walk in there right now and maybe that was all part of the plan. Who knows, right? That's the frustrating thing about seers and future telling and people who have insight into how things are supposed to play out, is you never truly know if you're playing into their hands or if you're truly kind of muddling the waters, you know?
Mhm.
You're sort of just left to guess it to your own devices. That being said, though, how long do you intend to wait here for Atticus?
Probably close to an hour.
Okay. Okay. After an hour, you note that the tavern itself seems to be winding down. Patrons are starting to filter out of the building, and those few kind of dedicated men and what few servers are left to serve them that remain are just barely hanging on, having consumed their fair share of food and drink and smoke. A few gather to kind of sleep on the rug near the fire, and uh, some of the fur draped chairs nearby, and a few of them kind of are dragged out by one of the tavern keeper's sons as he attempts to kind of get his place in order. But Atticus himself has not left that room. They have been speaking at length for some time. Given the kind of person Atticus is, he's a lot less reasonable than you are, and certainly several degrees more paranoid, so perhaps Abad has his work cut out for him. And what you do know, though, at least for now, is not only is this taking a while, but your eyelids are starting to feel heavy, and you're getting that familiar sting in the back of your eyeballs. It's been a bit. You're getting tired. You're starting to feel that kind of drowsiness set in, and that heavy-handed, sort of almost lead-like sluggishness grip your limbs slightly as tiredness sets in. What do you wish to do?
Let's see, I do not have a room in this particular inn, right?
You do still. I'm fairly certain.
Okay.
If you have not bought one, but I'm pretty sure you've purchased one for the night, you could always go down to the tavern keeper. But for the sake of the game, I will simply assume that was arranged last time.
Very well.
Yep. So you do have a room, at least for the night, and so does Atticus, and you both tend to have separate rooms.
Randall will go and meander up the stairs and go to knock on Abad's door.
Well, it's only a 2-story building. You're on the second floor at the moment, which is as high as it goes. So, okay, so you want to go to Abad's door and knock?
Yep.
Yeah. You walk up to the door and you kind of rap on it. Do you say anything, or you're just knocking on
it? Randall will probably knock on the door and say, Atticus, do you have a moment?
You don't hear a response from Atticus, but you do hear Abad from the other side of the door speak in return. Forgive me, Sir Randall, but we are currently in the midst of a rather difficult series of negotiations. If you do not mind, all will become clear in the morning.
I see. I merely wish to acknowledge to the both of you that I was turning it.
Ah, well. Your thoughtfulness will be remembered. Please, come to my quarters in the morning. I will have everything hopefully settled by then.
Very well.
Yep. He gives you... there is nothing but a resounding silence from beyond the worn oaken frame of the door, and you begin to head to your room. I'm assuming that's where you want to go, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. You make your way down the hallway that has long since been emptied. One of the local wenches kind of seems to be sweeping up some of the filth at the end of the hallway and rearranging the stuffed head of a stag at the very top, as it was apparently knocked loose or jarred by some sort of impact Otherwise, the top floor is starting to calm down as a lot of the kind of drunk and rambunctious patrons sort of drift away from their sort of rowdy drunkenness into a bit more of a subdued slumber. Uh, the end of the night is essentially approaching. Everybody's starting to go to sleep. Places are locking up, and it seems as though you're picking the correct time to go to sleep. You might even get a really good one, given that everybody else is also starting to wind down and the noise and rambunctiousness of the tavern is coming to an end. You enter your room, and as before, seems to be relatively modest. It has a bed, it has a storage chest for your belongings, it has some candles nearby that can be lit with not candles. It has a kind of a few lamps nearby that can be lit with enough oil to last at least a couple hours if needed. There is a small little kind of lectern nearby that is meant to hold books or something of the sort, paper. There's a kind of a rickety wooden stool nearby that looks like it's definitely seen its fair share of use. The floors themselves are fairly well maintained, save for the odd kind of old stain, likely from decades of just mounding and compounding filth that was more recently scrubbed off. There are shutters in this room, so you actually have the opportunity for a unique and most definitely breathtaking street view, although the smell might discourage you. And more importantly, you have a kind of enough space here to just sort of wander about, pace, and think should you not wish to do so from the comfort of your bed, which, all things considered, seems fairly nice. A relatively well-maintained sort of hay mattress with some sheep's wool blanket covering and an actual pillow. So hey, yeah, not too bad.
Things are looking up.
Relatively cheap as well, so not terrible. And you wish to settle away for the night?
Randall will likely spend 20 minutes likely drawing on the lectern and considering whether or not to use one of his extracurricular powers, and likely decide against it before turning in.
What are you drawing?
I assume because it was popular that Randall will try to emulate one of the things that he drew that sold for a bod. Likely some kind of landscape.
Anything in mind, in particular? A lot of your life experience tends to be, if I understand correctly, rooted in the eastern part of the Imperium Divinatus, so most of Basilar, which tends to be a lot of rolling countrysides, hills, small sort of brushings of forest and thicket nearby, with the occasional flattened field, farms, and in the distance, the mountains that lead over toward the Great Wall.
I'm assuming the Great Wall was for the scar?
Yes. So you could draw something encompassing that landscape if you wished, or you could just make something up. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic. You could just draw.
I think it would be interesting to encapsulate maybe a sort of half and half of a view of like the Wall of the Scar, which is basically like overshadowed in the foreground behind a mountain outcrop.
Sure. I don't think you have to roll for that. I think that's a specialty.
Yep, that is a general talent.
Yeah, okay.
Trade.
Going to just give it a quick read real quick. Just to determine whether or not you actually have to like roll for anything. Doubt it, but never hurts to double check, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to give it to you. Given enough time, and even though you're a bit tired, you manage to sort of begin your piece de resistance. Well, insofar as you can, with some of the limited kind of instruments you have to work with, but generally speaking, spending enough time, you're able to, at the very least, before exhaustion kind of begins to take its toll on you, get the outline of the image that you'd like prepared. You kind of scrawl the outline of like the scar in the background, ominous and sort of foreboding, covered only by the strong mountains reaching up to the sky, forest nestled at the threshold with vast, wide, fertile fields kind of expanding outward from there. Yet it is only the draft. It's just the beginning. The sun shines brightly, almost defiantly in the background, kind of bearing down on the darkness that otherwise threatens to kind of encapsulate the mood of the image. And as you kind of lay out that final streak with your kind of sort of coal, your kind of unique coal chalk, for lack of a better word, at long last, the weight that grips your eyelids becomes unbearable. Every second you spend awake is torturous. You've really pushed yourself. But you've at least got some of the more important aspects of your drawing done. So long as you were to kind of make some efforts to preserve it, you might be able to finish it at some point when you're in clearer headspace.
Nice.
So, yeah, you've got something truly special going on here. What do you wish... Yep.
I think my character's going to turn in after that.
Sure. Okay. And you'll do so. And me, I'm going to get some coffee. Oh, BRB.
Woo!
If you're not ready, just let me know.
Alright, so you called for a strength check. You called for a 10.
Yes.
That's going to be kind of hard to beat.
Yep.
Hit. No.
Okay. Yeah, you're just exhausted. There's been a lot happening recently, and while you have managed to squeeze in some level of sleep, there's a certain type of exhaustion that bears down on people when they go through any sort of ordeal. Although there's something different. You wake up, and while you're fairly certain that you should kind of feel that familiar grogginess when you first rise, and kind of the feeling that your body is starting to wind itself back up again and accustom itself to just waking up out of its sort of dream state. One thing you notice is there's a distinct lack of anything, really. You wake up and it's just sort of... you're just sort of there.
Like a sort of numbed feeling?
Not even. It's just nothing. You wake up and there's no grogginess. You don't even really feel rested. You just know that you can function. You're not tired. And more importantly, there's this kind of soft lingering in your mouth, almost like you swallowed a handful of just concentrated cinnamon minus the taste, even though you don't have anything in your mouth. It doesn't last long, but it's altogether thoroughly unpleasant. Also, something else. You feel somehow inexplicably different. And yet, you almost feel compelled to just touch the area that had been previously injured in your encounter all those days ago.
My forehead?
Yeah. Do you touch it?
Oh yeah, my character, if he's compulsive, is like, what? What is that? And he'll like slap his forehead. He's like, what?
There is no wound.
Eh,
Nothing. Not even a scar, as you kind of run your fingers over the arrow-sized hole that had once been in your forehead.
I'm not gonna lie, that probably freaks Randall right the fuck out.
Yeah? It's not an unreasonable reaction.
I do have a question, though.
Go ahead.
Would Randall have healed the one wound he would gotten from having 2 points of strength from that night of sleep?
Spoon, I want you to write something under the death tithe.
Okay.
Okay. You no longer have a health total. Your health is // Does that make sense?
Dash wounds, dash wounds.
Yep. You have no discernible health total anymore.
Well, that's terrifying.
Something else also kind of strikes you. You don't know why, but ever since that lack of sensation from waking up in the morning, you can't help but almost maybe if you open the shutters, you'd get a better view of what's going on.
That sounds like a decent compulsion. I'll go and open the shutters.
You as you open the shutters, the light of the morning kind of greets you almost immediately. And just before you are able to truly survey some of the changes that you suspect have fallen upon you, you hear a loud and sudden at your door, accompanied by that familiar voice. Sahir Randall.
Yes.
I had expected you to awaken a bit earlier, but perhaps I did not take into account your exhaustion as thoroughly as I should have. I cannot remain for long, but if you would open the door, we may conclude our dealings.
Randall will trundle on over to the door and then he'll open it.
Yep.
Probably absolutely forgetful that he's left his hat off.
Left his which off?
His hat off.
Yep. Abad, if he notices anything off about your appearance, doesn't seem to mention it, but in his hands, unmistakable, is the lever that Atticus had been so reluctant to part with. Abad bears the baggy eyes and slumped demeanor of a man who, if you didn't know any better, had just returned from an arduous and restless trek across the most forsaken and desolate lands available. And yet the truth is far more humorous. He had simply spent the entire night attempting to appeal to Atticus' sense of reason. He looks at you for a moment, and he holds the book out in his hands and says, "It took me the entirety of the night to appeal to Atticus's ambitions, and to make him see reason. Understand that he was almost infallible in his desire to hang on to this thing, and yet could never describe why."
That sounds spot on.
Yet, once I offered him an opportunity such that was along the lines of what you had mentioned, he seemed more malleable to reason. It took some time, but I have arranged for Atticus to begin his own thread of this tale. But I feel it only fair that I mention to you that he has already left this place on his journey, and I doubt you will ever see your traveling companion again. He is determined to seize what he believes is his. He has been sitting on this ambition or ideas thereof for some time, and through my wealth and personal connections in the imperial court, I am his key. In exchange, of course, I asked but one thing: that he assist me in completing my own personal task. It took me all night, and I was convinced that perhaps he was not going to turn over this thing, but with sufficient incentive, gold and favors, and the promise of an opportunity to advance himself in the minor courts of the Imperium, he decided that perhaps now was a good time to fulfill his own personal goals. Understand that this is now the end of your journey together, and the beginning of yours alone.
I see.
Randall, remember what we had discussed. I do not wish to sully the memory of our budding friendship with selfishness, but of course, given the opportunity that I have seen not only here but in you, I would be foolish to pass up what I have wanted for many years now. An opportunity to save my mother from her fate, and more importantly, the sublime chance to seize the knowledge of a man who could become the architect of not just her fate, but perhaps our own. I would be willing to share such a blessing with you, in so much as I am taking a risk trusting you as I would trust any other man of any other station. Yet at least you bear some closer connection to this way of the world, such as it is. Once and if you find what it is you seek, don't forget me. I beg you. He hands you the Liber. Do you take it from him?
Randall will slowly reach over to put both of his hands on the flesh Liber.
Yep.
He'll look at it for a couple moments. A question, if I may, but
I will answer. I will
there
answer
anything
you.
on my forehead?
He gives a look, shrugs. Not that I can tell, but I must say, you are a bit paler in the light of the sun than you were in the candles.
Randall will give him a bit of a faraway stare as he kind of looks back down at the book. I see.
As for your friend, do not worry about him. I have not been told anything of use regarding his fate, but what I do know is that you are uniquely ordained for this task, as I was uniquely ordained to set you upon it, as the seer was uniquely ordained to set me upon mine. We each play out our part, but now that my task is finished, I must wait for you. And Atticus may now continue on his own terms. Perhaps he will get what he wishes, or perhaps not.
Randall
As
gives a
for me-
nod at that.
As for me, I will be returning to my kingdom after perhaps one more night here. But, and I do not mean for this to seem insulting, but I will no longer be entertaining visitors. This has been a rather interesting journey, and I wish to record it and spend time musing over what I have discovered, and perhaps at some point you may read my entries, if they should become anything of note, and when you visit my kingdom.
Well, as you have stated, that is not for a long, long time.
He gives you a nod and a bit of a smirk. Good fortune to you, Randall.
Peace be upon you, Abad.
He gives you a kind of a bow at the waist, and then extends his hand to give you kind of a firm handshake.
Randall will put the lever underneath his left armpit and reciprocate with the right hand.
Yep. Then he turns on his heels after giving you a solid handshake and makes his way toward his room. Spoon, you are now in position, officially and fully, of the Flesh Liber.
AKA the book.
You can only imagine what he had to do to negotiate it off of Atticus. And he looked the part. Clearly exhausted.
Gold, favors, opportunities, God knows what else.
All to fulfill what he claimed was a personal destiny set out before him at a very young age. A culturally significant ritual that, at least for him, or maybe whatever subsection of his culture he belongs to, is almost a sacred, unquestionable rite of passage, as it were. As for Atticus, well, it seemed very clear since the moment you two were drawn together that there was no love lost between you two. While he likely did not hate you or wish ill upon you, you also could likely gather that should an opportunity to fulfill his own whims came up, that he would be more than willing to be opportunistic in his approach of them. And whatever offer Abad made him, it was very clear that if one thing was to be determined, is that Atticus would go alone, without you. That already confirms what you may have suspected before. And that is that for some reason Abad has approached this as methodically and as calculated as necessary. And although it seemed like he was forthcoming and honest, and likely was, there were certain details that you suspect he had very carefully and consciously omitted. For what reason, as I stated, you can only suspect, and only suspect because of your unique gifts. Were it not for that, you'd be in the dark.
Valley spell, no!
Spoon.
Yeah.
I honestly think this is a decent spot to end it.
Fair enough.
This is kind of a big moment. And I've got something for you. I will not explain mechanically how your health now works. But it is safe to say that your HP is X. What is X? You'll have to find out. I will also say that from now on, you are capable, as a result of your possession of this Liber, should you wish, of melding the concepts of divination and necromancy together to form wholly unique spells that can utilize both concepts.
Woo!
That is what I'll give you. For now. What is required now from me is arduous, long, and hard work in order to begin plotting out where things go from here. This is the easy part. The hard part is every single thing that follows this moment. But know that whatever happens from here is likely to get extremely complicated and difficult. It's going to require you to not only pay attention to everything around you if you want to succeed, but it's also going to put you in a position that I have never put any player in the history of this setting. And you are likely to see and encounter things that, under normal circumstances, you'd never have access to.
That is not an inherently good thing.
Yep. But now you have that opportunity. And more importantly, you have the rather kind of unique privilege of being one of the casters in the setting who can forge unique spells by blending two concepts, which is a thing in the setting. It's not necessarily always something that must come from an artifact. Some people can do it on their own. It's more of a matter of time. Blending concepts is extremely complicated and time-intensive, and human beings don't live that long. Elves can do it, but they have all the time they need. But you basically have a little bit of a cheat code with you. Sort of. And it has latent power such that, as a magic user, and as the person currently in possession of the object, fully and completely, it, to some degree, bestows upon you. But not all power comes without some sort of requirement, consequence, or other responsibility or drawback.
And they almost certainly don't come without cost.
Yep. I'm going to give you 10 XP.
Damn.
That was a fairly significant part of the story, and not only that, I am ending this arc. And a new one will begin the next time we game from here. So I hope you write that down. Do you have any questions, any criticisms, anything you want to pass on to me, or are you just saving a baby man freak out randomly?
I think I'll save the baby man freak out for at least another 4 or 5 arcs.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I appreciate the heads up.
Do you have a name that you would prefer this arc to go by?
No, you can name it whatever you want. I'll name it something for myself, but I think it's neat that you get to personalize your own little journal, you know?
Fair enough.
Do you have any kind of questions, anything that you want to talk about regarding the game?
Other than maybe meeting up at some point to, potentially make one of those, like, dual spells. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so you do have questions. Do you?
I would like to ask about, like, the general, like, size and scope of the city to where the point where it's, like, surrounded by mercenaries.
Surrounded by mercenaries? Can you clarify a little bit? It's been a while since we played.
I'm trying to get an idea of the general size of the town that I'm currently residing in to where it can be physically, like, almost upended and surrounded by mercenaries.
Any particular reason, or am I just baked? Because I think
I'm just trying to get an idea of, like, what I would have to go through to, like, go and actually potentially find help. Even though it is, like, in the Festival of Swords, I would have to be very careful about how my character words his particular contracts if he decides to hire anybody.
Yeah, of course. Well, you're not in a major capital, but you are in a place where a festival is going to be taking place for at least the next few weeks, possibly even the months. You don't have to go far to find... you don't have to go far to find what I could only describe to you as those adventurer-looking retards. But it's more of a question of price and, more importantly, reputation. You don't just want to hire anybody. You can, and you can pay them, but I would recommend doing some asking around before you just jump into hiring whoever just because they charge the lowest gold or clearly look the best armed. I mean, you're kind of undertaking a bit of an insane quest here.
Yep.
You're pretty much following the tracks of a mage who is long since dead on the hopes that you can maybe find the remainder of this powerful artifact that he was using as a conduit to essentially fuck with time, because changing time, even if you are capable, doing so, especially the further back you go and the more precise you get, requires insane power that most human beings are not capable of, you know?
Yep.
So, you're kind of on an insanely high-level quest, and more important than that is, like, you are also possibly approaching one of the most valuable artifacts in the entire setting. So
Which is a big deal.
Pick your companions very, very wisely. And should you pick them, or choose to take anybody with you, get to know them. Bear in mind that if and should you pick them, I will be not only writing unique character sheets for them, but I will also be creating and adjusting their personalities over the course of the adventure. And they will all want different things and have different temperaments. So, keep that in mind. You're embarking on something that, for normal characters, is, I don't even want to say highly dangerous and unpredictable, but
borderline insane.
Almost certainly a death sentence for somebody who's not a mage. Especially a mage who can't see the future. But you're kind of uniquely positioned to get it done. You just have to be careful. For whatever, that's worth to you.
That is definitely a good advice to take.
Yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed the game. It was a bit short, but it was essentially just kind of getting us started for the next kind of major jump.
I'll promise not to spend the entire next session in the library.
Yeah, you don't have to, but you can if you want. As I said to you earlier, I would have preferred Debo kind of having been here to do his part, because I would have very much liked to roleplay that interaction between us.
Mm-hmm.
Me playing a bod, trying to convince him. But, Debo had a baby man attack because he didn't allow the story to continue because he wasn't getting his way. Or at least not in the way that he wanted. So he never got an opportunity to essentially get the thing that he claims he wanted, which that character was uniquely positioned to give him. Or at least set him on the path toward, right? Which was the original plan even back then. So that's why I thought it was really funny that he just so happened to tap out when he was so close to being offered an opportunity to take what he wanted. So, fair enough. I mean, I also say that I did everything within my power to play his character to a minimum. But I also took into account everything Debo has ever said about his character and his character's ambitions. And as far as I can tell, they seemed sincere, not only from the character, but also from Debo himself. So as far as I'm concerned, I could see no logical reason for Debo to turn down what I could only describe as a very real and tangible opportunity to not only go back to the Imperium, but to finally be able to utilize his political contacts on top of the assistance that Abad's wealth and family connections would give him in the Imperial Court. I could see no logical reason for Debo to say no to that, other than to just... I mean, honestly, just to be difficult in metagame, if I'm being completely honest.
Other than the death tithe.
Yeah, I mean, that will likely require his character to sort on his own accord, but what that looks like would have been up to him. But what I do know is that whatever the death tithe is, it doesn't require you to sit in a certain spot, right? So, Debo's character will have to deal with that if she should so choose on his own time and with his own methods. But he did basically get offered the opportunity of a lifetime that likely would not be offered again. So, I couldn't really see any reason why he'd turn it down, unless he just felt like being difficult, which...
Or he just really didn't like my character.
Yeah, again, just being
I don't
difficult.
even know if, like, a bond is like, you're going to be giving this book to Randall. What? Never. He's a piece of shit. Fuck that guy.
Well, whatever Abad attempted, it's safe to say he didn't just attempt one thing, he attempted everything in the kitchen sink.
And then dropped the toilet.
And then probably sold fucking Atticus the factory that makes the kitchen sink. I don't know. Like it. Give it. I played the situation the best I could based on what I know of Debo's character.
Fair.
Whether or not Debo approves, and I'm going to be honest, I don't care. You don't get to hold my games hostage. Period. You're more than welcome to play, but if you put conditions on when you can play and when you can come back and yada yada. Basically, if you say I'm not playing the game until you finish your setting and finish this and finish that. Oh, and by the way, you can't advance the story until I feel like it. Yeah, I don't play that game. That's stupid. You're more than welcome to come back, but if you set hard limits like that and give ultimatums, I will make the story go forward. So that's really what we're doing. The world does not wait for you. That's kind of how I look at it. It might seem harsh, but, holding the story hostage for everybody else involved is super selfish. Especially when your reasoning for doing so was really poor and almost bizarrely out of nowhere,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Did what I could to kind of wrap it up, put the responsibility on your character, and now you can go forward, hopefully enjoying a pretty crazy adventure. Or hating it, at least from the perspective of your character.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you've gotten a lot from that session.
God, I'm gonna do so much fucking planning now.
You could say that. On the plus side, should you live long enough to become a very powerful mage, you could start creating really fun spells. Like Visions of Death, where you can just kill somebody by fucking showing them a vision of their death.
Literally just become a ranged banshee.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, not only can you mix necromancy and divination, you can get necromancy spells if you want, by themselves. It's not just one way. You can do it either way you want. But to be fair, if you get a necromancy spell, you can't get a divination spell.
I'm already cooking up a fairly kind of an insane idea for a fucking potential divination spell.
Sure.
So I'm thinking of calling it something like Final Moments, where my character can basically reenact the death of a character he's never seen.
Reenact the which?
Reenact the death of a character he's never seen or met.
That's a necromancy.
Free insanity spells.
Yeah, that's a necromancy spell, and honestly, you just need necromancy for that. The only reason it's purely necromancy is because of the fact that it's attached to their death. If it wasn't attached to their death, you'd probably need divination as well. Where that would change, and it would be a vastly superior and much more costly and powerful spell, is if you wanted to kind of use that spell on like a desiccated fucking almost evaporated skeleton. Now we're looking into really going into the past. So pre-sight, right? But that doesn't seem like that's what you're trying to do at the moment.
I mean, that definitely adds some like potential like ritual qualities to that spell.
Oh yeah, don't forget rituals. If you want specific rituals, then again, that will take up a spell slot. But the advantage of rituals is that they're rituals and that they can be super fucking powerful. They take time and usually preparation and components if you want to maximize your odds of success. Oh, and please don't fuck rituals up.
Oh yeah.
Please don't fuck rituals up.
Please,
God. Yeah, I think it went pretty well, all things considered.
All right, thanks for the game, Ryan. I'll go think up a couple ideas for spells, and then you can tell me how fucking baked I am.
Sure. Are you leaving the call, or are you just going to be writing and being a fag?
I figured that X and the gang probably wants to play Helldivers.
Sure, dude. Yeah. Well, I'll be hanging out here until I pass out, pretty much. But trying not to fuck up my sleeping schedule too much. If it's not super late, I'll probably still be in here. So, yeah, man, enjoy.